Imagine looking at a fish tank. Right.
Yeah.
But there's absolutely no filter.
Right, no machine humming away.
Exactly. No bubbles pulling water through a sponge or anything. And because of that, this thick, fuzzy, just bright green algae has completely swallowed the entire ecosystem.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It is aggressively coating the glass, smothering the gravel on the floor, and just, blanketing every single decoration inside.
A total hostile takeover.
Yeah, just a massive, unchecked explosion of fuzz.
Yeah.
And if you're picturing this, your brain is probably telling you that the water inside must look like a toxic, cloudy swamp.
Right, because that's what you'd expect.
Exactly. But you look closer, and the water itself is pristine, like completely flawlessly crystal clear.
Which really, I mean, it shatters just about every assumption we have about how a healthy environment is supposed to look.
It totally does.
We are so conditioned to trust our eyes, We see clear water and we instantly think safe, clean, balanced.
Right, clear equals good.
Right. But biology, especially in a closed environment like a fish tank, it doesn't always care about our visual shortcuts. Sometimes the clearest water is actually hiding the most volatile ecosystem.
And that is exactly what we are getting into today. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are pulling apart a bizarre biological mystery that really challenges everything we think we know about keeping an ecosystem clean.
It's a fascinating one.
It really is. We're looking at an entry from a 2026 blog post titled Notes on Fishkeeping Part 315, When the Algae is the Filter. It was written by an aquarist named Ang.
Yeah, and if you've ever kept a goldfish and, panicked the second the water started looking even a little bit cloudy.
Oh, guilty.
Right? Well, this one is really going to mess with your head. We are talking about a scenario where the grossest, most invasive thing in the tank is actually the only thing keeping it perfectly transparent.
At least until the sun goes down anyway.
Exactly. It really is a brilliant case study in unintended consequences. And it forces you to look past the aesthetics of an environment and really examine the actual biological machinery, turning the gears beneath the surface.
So how did Ang even end up with this bizarre, fuzzy, clear water anomaly in the first place?
Well, it actually started with a lighting experiment.
Okay.
Ang was messing around with LED aquarium lights and decided to just leave the lights on for several consecutive days.
Wait, like no nighttime?
Right, just flooding the tanks with artificial sunlight 24/7 without a break.
That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It is. When you dump that much continuous solar energy or, artificial solar energy into an enclosed box of water, the biological response is going to be explosive.
Because plants and algae need light to grow.
Exactly. They use light as the primary engine for their metabolism. But what's really interesting is that Ang was running this experiment across a few different tanks, and they didn't all react the same way.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The parameters of the water, so like the temperature, the existing nutrients, the microscopic life already present at all, meant that each tank developed its own unique variation of an algae bloom.
Okay, but there was this one standout tank, right?
Yes.
Ang noted that this specific tank just went entirely off the rails visually, but in a very specific way.
Right, the clear water one.
Yeah. The water was immaculate, but the interior, Ang describes this thick, fuzzy, green algae colonizing absolutely everything. The glass walls, the substrate, which is just the fancy aquarium word for the gravel at the bottom.
Right.
And a little terracotta pot sitting in the middle.
Yeah.
Just covered.
Like I said, a complete hostile takeover. The algae essentially claimed every available surface area as its own territory.
It is such a wild image. It's like walking into a friend's house and the living room is perfectly immaculate. The air is crisp, completely dust-free. You could eat off the floor.
Okay, I like where this is going.
But then you realize the walls, the ceiling, the couch, the television, everything is upholstered in thick green shag carpet.
That is a very visceral way to picture it, but biologically, it's spot on. The medium you are moving through. So the water in this case is completely unobstructed.
Right.
But the surfaces are suffocated.
But this is where my brain just gets stuck. I'm looking at this shag carpet tank. There's no mechanical filter, no pump sucking water through carbon, or a sponge to catch the dirt.
Right.
How is it physically possible for the water to be so incredibly clear when there's a massive algae bloom happening? Like, where is all the gunk going?
To understand that, we have to look at what that gunk actually is, chemically speaking. The fuzzy algae isn't just a weed sitting there looking ugly.
Okay.
It is actively functioning as the filter itself.
Wait, the algae is the filter. How does a layer of fuzz replace a humming machine?
Well, think about what a mechanical aquarium filter actually does. Yes, it has a sponge to catch floating fish poop or uneaten food.
Right, the gross stuff.
Yeah, but the most important part of a filter is the biomedia. It's usually these little ceramic rings or plastic balls that provide a surface for beneficial bacteria to live on.
Oh, I've seen those, like little porous rocks.
Exactly. And that bacteria eats the invisible dissolved toxins in the water.
What kind of toxin? Because if the water is clear, you don't really think about toxins being there.
The primary culprit is ammonia. Every time a fish respires, every time it produces solid waste, or every time a pinch of fish food goes uneaten and rots at the bottom of the
It
tank,
creates ammonia.
yes, it breaks down into highly toxic ammonia. If that ammonia builds up, it burns the fish's gills and eventually kills them.
Likes.
In a normal tank, the bacteria in your plastic filter eat the ammonia and convert it into slightly less toxic compounds like nitrates and then nitrates.
Okay, so the fish are basically swimming around constantly generating an invisible toxic cloud just by being alive.
Precisely. It's called the nitrogen cycle. And
Yeah.
in Aang's tank, because there is no plastic filter and no ceramic biomedia for bacteria to live on,
There's nowhere for the good bacteria to go.
right, so the ammonia is just sitting there in the water column, meaning dissolved in the actual water itself. It's basically an all-you-can-eat buffet of unused nutrients: ammonia, nitrates, phosphates.
And the fuzzy algae steps in to eat it.
Aggressively. That dense, fuzzy green carpet on the glass and the terracotta pot is highly industrious.
Wow.
It's acting as a massive, continuous, living chemical vacuum. It is stripping those dissolved toxins directly out of the water to fuel its own growth.
Okay, I follow the vacuum analogy, but I'm still a bit hung up on the clarity of the water.
Okay, why is that?
Well, if there's a massive algae bloom because of all this endless light and fish waste, why doesn't the water itself turn into green soup? Isn't algae what makes ponds look murky and cloudy in the first place?
Ah, that is a very common misconception. You are thinking of a totally different type of organism called planktonic algae.
Plankton?
Yeah, planktonic algae is microscopic and free-floating. It doesn't attach to surfaces. It just drifts, suspended in the water. When that stuff blooms, that is when your water turns into an opaque green smoothie.
Ah, okay. So we have surface algae, the fuzzy shag carpet, and we have planktonic algae, the green smoothie.
Exactly.
Why isn't the green smoothie growing in Aang's tank if there are so many nutrients?
Because the surface algae is out competing it on a massive scale. By aggressively hogging all the ammonia, the nitrates, and the phosphates, the fuzzy algae on the glass is completely starving out the free-floating planktonic algae.
Oh man, it's like a competitive eater intercepting every single tray of food at a buffet before anyone else can even grab a bite.
That's exactly it.
The surface algae is just parked at the kitchen door, intercepting all the ammonia, and the floating algae is just standing in the middle of the room with an empty plate, starving to death.
That is the exact dynamic. It is a ruthless demonstration of resource competition in a closed environment. The surface algae has essentially cornered the market on the tank's chemical resources.
So the smoothie algae doesn't stand a chance.
There is literally nothing left for the planktonic algae to feed on, so it cannot survive. And because the planktonic algae dies off, the water remains flawlessly, beautifully clear.
Okay, but, I mean, if the surface algae is doing all of this heavy lifting,
Yeah.
isn't this amazing?
Yeah.
I mean, it is acting as this incredible natural biological filter, actively stripping out the deadly ammonia, keeping the water perfectly transparent, and doing it all without us having to plug in a single noisy machine.
It does sound ideal, doesn't it?
Isn't this the holy grail of fish keeping? Like, why would anyone ever want to change this? It sounds like Aang accidentally created a self-sustaining natural utopia.
It looks like a utopia, and that brings us right back to our opening warning about how heavily we rely on visual cues.
Ah, right. Trusting our eyes.
Exactly. A crystal clear tank feels like a triumph. But this is where Aang discovered the hidden and frankly quite lethal catch to this perfect natural filter.
The catch. Why is there always a catch with nature?
Because biological systems don't have an off switch. When an ecosystem gets pushed to an extreme, like allowing an entire tank to be carpeted in algae, it creates what Aang perfectly describes as invisible toxicity.
Invisible toxicity. That is such a chilling phrase. What exactly is turning toxic if the nutrients are being eaten and the water is clear?
The threat isn't coming from the fish waste anymore. It's coming from the metabolic cycle of the algae itself. And the trap springs the exact moment the sun goes down.
Oh, wow.
Or in Aang's case, the moment the continuous LED lighting is finally turned off and the tank goes dark.
Okay, walk me through this. What happens in the dark?
During the day, with the lights on, the algae is photosynthesizing. It's acting like a perfect roommate, using light energy to consume carbon dioxide from the water and releasing fresh, clean oxygen for the fish to breathe.
So far, so good.
But plants and algae can't photosynthesize in the dark. Without light, they switch to respiration to survive. They essentially reverse their breathing process.
Wait, revert?
Yes. The algae stops producing oxygen and starts aggressively consuming it. And at the same time, it starts exhaling massive amounts of carbon dioxide back into the water.
Wait, so the exact same organism that was purifying the tank all day suddenly turns around and starts sucking all the life-giving oxygen out of the water at night.
It does. And remember the scale of this. We aren't talking about a few decorative plants. We're talking about a tank completely smothered in a dense carpet of algae.
Right, the shag carpet.
Exactly. The collective respiration, the deep nighttime inhale of all that biomass is staggering. It causes a severe, rapid drop in the water's oxygen levels.
Oh, that is such a betrayal. It is literally a nighttime trap.
It really is.
It's like having a roommate who meticulously cleans your entire house all day. They scrub the floors, do the dishes, organize the closet.
Sure.
But then the absolute second you go to sleep, they lock all the windows, seal the doors, and start stealing all the oxygen out of your bedroom.
The roommate analogy is painfully accurate here. But the suffocation risk is actually only half of the invisible toxicity.
There's more.
Oh, yeah. The other half is what happens to the water chemistry when that massive algae carpet exhales all that carbon dioxide.
Does the CO2 poison the fish?
It's a bit more indirect, and it comes down to basic chemistry. When you pump heavy amounts of carbon dioxide into water, it doesn't just sit there as a gas. It reacts with the H2O to form carbonic acid.
Carbonic acid. So it's actually changing the acidity of the water itself.
Drastically. As the algae dumps CO2 overnight, the water becomes rapidly more acidic. This triggers severe wild swings in the tank's pH level.
And I'm guessing fish don't like pH swings.
They are incredibly sensitive to pH. A sudden crash in pH can burn their gills, destroy their protective slime coat, and send them into deadly osmotic shock.
That is terrifying.
Yeah.
You look at the tank right before you turn out the lights to go to bed, and you think, wow, the water's so clear. This ecosystem is perfectly balanced.
Right.
But that visual clarity is giving you a complete false sense of security.
Yeah.
The ecosystem is actually a ticking time bomb. While you sleep, the water turns into an oxygen-deprived acid bath.
And you would never see it happening. The water remains totally transparent the entire time.
That's the craziest part.
It is. If you only measure the health of a system by its most obvious visual indicator, you completely miss the invisible chemical swings. Clarity does not equal stability.
Okay, so Aang realizes they've essentially built a crystal-clear death trap. The Holy Grail is a lie. We obviously can't leave the tank like this if there are fish living in there.
Definitely not.
So how do we dismantle the time bomb without just throwing a noisy mechanical filter back into the tank?
Well, Aang actually lays out a very deliberate blueprint for pulling the ecosystem back from the brink of extreme volatility while still maintaining that filterless approach.
Walk me through it. Where do you even start when the walls are covered in shag carpet?
You start with physical intervention. Aang notes that the very first step is aggressively scraping or scooping the fuzzy algae out of the tank on a regular basis.
Oh, just getting in there and doing it by hand.
Exactly. You have to physically remove the sheer volume of that living the biomass from the water.
That makes total sense. If the problem is that millions of tiny algae strands are breathing in all the oxygen at night, you just need fewer strands breathing. You have to thin the herd.
Precisely.
But wait, if you just scrape it off the glass, won't it just immediately grow back? I mean, the fish are still in there pooping, the ammonia is still in the water, the buffet is still open.
That is where the second step comes in. You have to cut off the energy supply that allowed it to conquer the tank in the first place.
The lights.
Right. Aang plans to strictly limit the LED light exposure to a maximum of 6 to 8 hours a day.
So no more infinite artificial sun.
No. You force the algae into a natural, restricted metabolic rhythm. Without endless light energy, it simply doesn't have the fuel to continuously carpet the glass, even if there are nutrients in the water.
Okay, but wait. If we restrict the light and we aggressively scrape away the surface algae, we are kind of firing our natural biological filter. We are taking away the vacuum cleaner.
That's true.
If the algae isn't eating the toxic ammonia anymore, aren't the fish going to die from their own waste?
You've hit on the core issue of a closed loop. The nutrients are still there. So instead of letting rogue algae claim them, Ang's third step introduces a much safer biological competitor,
Which is?
actual aquatic plants.
Oh, I love this. This is straight up biological warfare.
Yeah.
You're deploying a friendly plant army to outcompete the algae for the food supply.
Essentially, yes. Aquatic plants consume the exact same ammonia, nitrates, and phosphates that the algae does. But they are a higher order organism. They have actual root systems, stems, and leaves.
It's like planting a massive oak tree right next to a tiny weed.
Okay, yeah.
The oak tree's deep root system is going to pull all the water and nutrients out of the soil, leaving absolutely nothing for the weed to drink. The weed starves, the tree thrives.
That is a perfect analogy. The aquatic plants pull the dissolved toxins out of the water column, starving the algae just like the surface algae starved the planktonic algae earlier.
Right.
But the crucial difference here is stability. Plants grow slower. Their biomass is much more contained. They aren't going to explosively carpet the glass.
And I'm guessing their breathing at night isn't as extreme.
Exactly. Their nighttime respiration won't cause the massive, violent oxygen crashes and pH swings that a hyperdense algae bloom causes. They provide a slow, steady, manageable biological filter.
So it's about replacing a volatile worker with a reliable one.
Exactly.
But even with plants, there is still no machine filtering this water. Is that really enough to keep the tank perfectly safe?
Not entirely, and Ang admits this. Which brings us to the fourth and perhaps most humbling step.
Okay, what is it?
Regular manual water changes.
Ah, the classic chore.
Yeah.
Getting a bucket and siphoning the water out yourself.
Yes, unfortunately. Ang specifically notes that if you are stubborn about not wanting to plug in a mechanical filter, you have to be the machine.
Right.
You have to manually cycle a percentage of that water out every week to dilute the unseen buildup of nutrients. Plants help a lot, but in a closed glass box, you cannot rely entirely on natural balancing acts without stepping in to act as the ultimate pressure release valve.
It really highlights just how much silent, invisible labor goes into replacing what a simple mechanical sponge filter does. We take that little plastic box for granted.
We really do.
But when you synthesize this whole journey, it really is profound. We started with what looked like an aesthetic oddity. You know, a fuzzy green terracotta pot sitting in flawlessly clear water.
Right.
And to understand it, we had to dive into microscopic nutrient wars, the chemical equations of carbonic acid, and the nighttime respiration cycles of a rogue ecosystem.
It proves that in nature, extreme clarity is often the result of extreme imbalance. The aggressive nutrient absorption that kept the water looking so pristine was the exact same mechanism setting the stage for those invisible, lethal pH swings at night.
It is wild how a tiny glass box of water can hold such a massive lesson. And it really brings us right back to the beginning of this deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we are such highly visual creatures. If we look at water and it is clear, we automatically assume it is healthy, balanced, and functioning perfectly.
Yeah, it's human nature.
But Ang's fish tank experiment proves, without a shadow of a doubt, that our eyes can lie to us. Total clarity can absolutely mask extreme, invisible volatility.
We build a false sense of security entirely on a pristine surface.
We really do. And it leaves me with this thought, and I want you, listening, to chew on this as you go about your day. We've been talking about a miniature aquarium, but this dynamic of visual deception exists everywhere.
Oh, absolutely.
What other crystal clear systems in your own life? Maybe a process at work that seems to run smoothly, a relationship that looks flawless from the outside, or even a societal system that appears perfectly ordered, look pristine on the surface, but might actually be masking invisible toxicities and wild volatility just beneath the water.
It's a great question.
Just because you can't see the murky swamp doesn't mean you aren't swimming in it. It's definitely something to mull over. We want to thank you so much for joining us on today's deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.